We have 4 large divisions, and they are what we call mission directorates. The first is Human Exploration and Operations Mission Directorate, and as the slide implies, when we were flying the space shuttle, that's where it resided. So operation of the space shuttle was the job of that directorate. Today they operate the International Space Station in conjunction with 4 other partners, international partners, the Japanese Space Agency, the European Space Agency, Roscosmos, the Russian Space Agency, and the Canadian Space Agency. So those are with us, that's the 5 partners that run the International Space Station. Important for me to say that because you read a lot of things and you hear a lot of things. No one country runs the International Space Station. It is a conglomerate. It is a treaty in the United States with 4 other agencies. The European Space Agency is the largest of those. It consists of now 22 different nations in Europe and growing. So it is quite a gathering of international partners to run the International Space Station. The other thing that we're doing right now is it's human exploration that is bringing on commercial capability to NASA. We don't do low Earth orbit anymore. All of you know about the space shuttle. That's the way that the United States used to take astronauts and cargo to low Earth orbit, to the International Space Station and other places. We phased the shuttle out successfully in July of 2011. So NASA has no organic way to get things and people to space. We rely on American industry. We have 2 companies, SpaceX and Orbital Sciences, that carry cargo for us. SpaceX has now conducted successfully 4 missions, and Orbital Sciences is about to launch their 3rd coming up later this month. So we don't do low Earth orbit. We just selected 2 contract award winners earlier or later last month, SpaceX and Boeing, the Boeing Corporation, and they're going to build the next 2 vehicles that will be capable of carrying humans to low Earth orbit. So that frees us up so that we can work with our international partners in building the vehicles that are necessary to go beyond low Earth orbit, back to lunar orbit, onto an asteroid by 2025, and eventually onto Mars in the 2030s. So you're going to hear me talk about going to Mars a lot, because that's NASA's big focus right now, and it's the focus of a total of 12 nations that signed and constructed a global exploration roadmap that selected Mars as the ultimate destination for humanity, with visits back to the moon, to asteroids and other places over the coming decades. So that's human exploration. It houses, or it is entrusted in maintaining the legacy of human spaceflight. So Human Exploration Mission Operations Directorate has its legacy, the Gemini, Mercury, Apollo programs, so goes all the way back to the beginning of human spaceflight, beginning when NASA was formed in 1958, after Sputnik went over the United States and other parts of the world. At that time, President Dwight Eisenhower decided the United States really needed to get into the space business. We needed to think about humans in space, and the National Aeronautics and Space Administration was formed by the National Space Act. So that's what brought us into being, and that's the legacy that we now guard. People always talk about the shuttle, and everybody thinks about its incredible technological capability and the incredible technological capability of the International Space Station. I think that shuttle's most important legacy through time will be what it did in terms of who goes to space today. If you look at those pictures, there were no women. There were no minorities. There were no different people flying in the days of Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo. Shuttle was capable of carrying 7 people to space at one time, 8 on one crew, and so it opened up the world of exploration to anybody who was qualified and wanted to go, and NASA continues to do that. So we continue to carry out the legacy of shuttle when it comes to enabling people from all over to fly into space. We have now had commanders of the International Space Station. Traditionally, it was either a Russian or an American. We have now had a Belgian. We've had different Europeans. We've had Koichi, who was from Japan. We have had Chris, right there in the bottom right, the Canadian, who is probably the most acclaimed International Space Station commander, because he revolutionized the way that we communicated from space. Really, we've always been, not always, but we have recently been using social media. Chris Hadfield just completely revolutionized the way we did it, and so we're trying to live up to the standards that he set. This is my crew from 1992. If you're trying to guess how old I am, don't. I'm old, yes, I will admit that. But this was my crew from 1992, and we were doing America's first mission to planet Earth, and it turned out not to be America's because it was actually most of the 13 experiments that we had on board were experiments from other nations, not from the United States. So it was the first time that we used the shuttle to look at Earth from the vantage point of space, measure different constituents of the atmosphere, trying to help us understand what then was called the mesosphere, the middle atmosphere. As a pilot and a non-scientist, I was talking to the Deputy Chief of Mission earlier. I asked Ms. Doherty if she had a science background. She said, well, I'm a jack of all trades. I said, oh, like me. So I will tell you a lot today, and it's what my staff taught me. It is not from my depth of knowledge that I don't really have. But as a pilot on the crew, we used to call it the ignorosphere because it was the middle atmosphere, an area of Earth's atmosphere that we knew little about, and it essentially had been ignored for decades. And this mission was the first mission that we actually tried to study it and understand it. Some of you know about MAVEN, that we launched to Mars, entered Mars orbit just last month. MAVEN would be a great mission to have flown on ours, except it's Mars and it's looking at Mars's upper atmosphere. So trying to help us understand what happened to the Martian atmosphere over millennia. We believe that Mars was once like Earth, and then somebody turned off the magneto in its core, and so it has no magnetic field like Earth anymore, and it doesn't have a way to protect itself, and so solar winds and other radiation just blow across the planet, and they've scraped its atmosphere away. And MAVEN is there now. That's right. You can ask a question. But MAVEN is there to study Mars's upper atmosphere and help us understand why. People always say, what in the world do you do in space? Lots of experimentation. Astronauts tend to be the principal guinea pigs. You know, if you're not sending test subjects up, what does that mean for the astronaut? They become the test subject. So this was my last flight back in 1994. This is Franklin Chang Diaz, and he and I were the two designated crew members for a lot of life sciences experiments. We would alternate one day on, one day off, being the phlebotomist to insert a catheter in the other, who would be the guinea pig. And so we took blood samples, urine samples, saliva samples all day long. And we did that throughout the entire length of the mission. But there's a lot of that goes on the International Space Station today. Why do we do it? To make your life better. Every single thing we do on the International Space Station is either for the purpose of enabling us to go to Mars, to develop the technologies that are going to enable humans to survive a trip to Mars, live on the planet, and come back, because Mars is 8 months away today, minimum. So 8 months of time away is not like going to the moon. The moon's 2 days away. Something bad happened, you just zip around the moon and come back, you're back home in 4 days. Mars is 8 months away. Once you start, you're going. And so the systems that we use, whether it's environmental control and life support, have to be very, very, very resilient. We don't carry spares, and you can't do the kind of stuff we do today. So that's a lot of the time on the International Space Station is spent trying to perfect the systems we have, also trying to understand the human body. How does it respond to the microgravity of space? You know, all of a sudden, when you first get to space, the first 2 days, you feel like you have the worst head cold in the world, because fluids begin to seek equilibrium. Gravity is taken away. You're going around Earth so fast, about 26,000 kilometers an hour, and it just overcomes gravity. And so the fluids in your body shift. You get the same amount in your head as you have in your legs. You look down and your big nice calves are gone, and your big fat head is there. You look in the mirror and your blood vessels are distended and everything. It's really easy to take care of. The first couple of days you go to the bathroom a lot, and you end up urinating out about 2 liters of fluid that the human body doesn't need. The immune system doesn't act right. It kind of goes away for a little while, and then over the time of 6 months in flight, it comes back, it gets hyperactive, then it settles down. And we don't fully understand that. We get increased intracranial pressure, more pressure in the head than we want, squeezes down on the optic nerve, causes degradation in visual acuity. Those are some of the things that we study on the International Space Station. And, oh, by the way, they come back to Earth. People who suffer osteoporosis, loss of bone mass. That happens to an astronaut starting like right now. So over the course of a week or 2 weeks without exercise in space, an astronaut would begin to exhibit the same symptoms as someone who had osteoporosis that developed over years here on Earth. So it gives us a great platform to study biomedical changes in the human body. So that's kind of what we do. Last thing about well, next to the last, right now we're trying to go to Mars. And in order to go to Mars, we need a big rocket and a crew module that can carry a crew. So on the left is the Space Launch System. It's under construction right now. When it's finished, it will be the largest rocket that's ever been produced. Our first version will be a 70 metric ton vehicle. Doesn't mean anything to you, but it means we can carry a lot of stuff. Eventually we'll get to a 130 metric ton vehicle, and you may say, why do you need something that big? Well, when you send humans anywhere, we need a lot of care and feeding. And so there's a lot of equipment, a lot of other stuff that has to go with humans when they go to Mars, and we think that a couple of 130 metric ton vehicles will be required to do that. We're going to launch Orion, which is the crew module. Looks a lot like an Apollo module, if any of you remember the history books, since most of you weren't around. But if you look in the history books, the Apollo module sort of looks like a dragon module, and Orion is going to look very similar, except it'll carry a crew of 7 instead of a crew of 3. And we're going to fly a test flight on Orion out of the Kennedy Space Center Cape Canaveral complex in December. So 2 months from now, we'll be launching the first time in more than 40 years a vehicle capable of carrying humans beyond low Earth orbit. On the right is the Dragon module. That really opened up everything in terms of commercialization of space. Up until Dragon flew to the International Space Station and safely came back to Earth, there had only been 3 entities, all 3 nations, China, Russia, the United States, that had ever launched anything into space and then brought it back to Earth intact. That's really hard to do. So SpaceX flew Dragon to the International Space Station. It stayed for a few weeks, came back, did a safe, intact reentry, and landed in the Pacific Ocean, becoming only the 4th time that any entity had ever done that. And so now we know that American industry and other industries can probably do the same thing. Actually, the folk here that work with Ozzy actually keep looking at, do we want to make other spacecraft from other nations human-rated? And then finally, the asteroid that we want to visit by 2025. This is just Vesta. A huge asteroid by asteroid standards. It's almost like a planet. And we sent a spacecraft called Dawn, just kind of crept up on it several years ago and spent a year orbiting Vesta, looking at it, studying it. We learned that Vesta had tectonic activity. It probably has water. It has all kinds of stuff that no one ever expected to have an asteroid to have on it. And then after we thought about it, we said, why did we not think that? The asteroid holds the key to the origins of our solar system. They are some of the oldest items in the solar system, so if we can get to an asteroid and study it the way we intend to do when we put one in lunar orbit, we'll know even more about Earth and the other planets in the solar system. And then finally, this just gives you examples of what American industry has done. Dream Chaser, down on the bottom, was one of the entrants in our commercial crew competition. It was a winged vehicle. There's the Dragon module, and that's the actual Dragon that was the first one to go to space and be safely brought back. Cygnus, down on the bottom, you all should love Cygnus. Anybody know why? Since nobody's going to ask me a question, I'll ask you one. Why should you love Cygnus? What's important about, you can't answer. Nor can my counterpart here. What's important about Cygnus? Come on! If I gave you a hint. Turin. Thalassalenia. So what? What about it? That's who built it. Cygnus is an American spacecraft only in name because it's owned by an American company, Orbital Sciences. But Cygnus is one of the 2 spacecraft that carries cargo to the International Space Station today, and that's yours. So that's why I keep saying this is the United States in cooperation with nations all over the world. We are about to produce the service module for the Orion crew module. The module itself carries the crew. The service module is a big piece that goes on the bottom of it that provides all the power, all of the supplies, and everything else. It's not an American company that's going to build the service module. The European Space Agency is going to provide it being done in Bremen. Parts are being done all over Europe. So We're not going to Mars by ourselves. We cannot do that. Aeronautics is the second directorate that we have of the 4. In aeronautics, we work with everything to try to make air travel safer, faster, more efficient. So we're looking for cleaner vehicles, quieter vehicles, faster vehicles. Our aeronautics mission directorate works everything from hovercraft, things that go up and down, human-less vehicles, UASs, unmanned aerial systems, to things that go hypersonic. Rockets going into space. They cover that whole speed regime, and that's our Aeronautics Mission Directorate. I kind of show you this one. It's an Demonstrator 787 that we're partnering with the Boeing Corporation because we're trying to make sure that we know how to build cleaner burning engines, how to build quieter aircraft, and it's an all-composite airframe, so it means it's stronger. It can contain more air inside. It means the pressure inside the cabin is higher than it would be normally. It means you can go to sleep and you're getting much more oxygen than you would because there's a lot more in the cabin. And you land after a long flight like we just came in from Washington, D.C., and you feel much more refreshed than you do on a normal airplane. But the Demonstrator is doing a lot of that. We also are looking at air traffic management. How do we get airplanes from point A to point B much more efficiently? And we've handed tools over to the American FAA so that now a flight controller can clear an airplane to take off, climb to its cruise altitude without all these intermediate level offs that cause your ears to go woof, 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 woof. And it saves lots of fuel, flies from point A to point B direct. We call it direct flight. And then when it gets to the other end, the air traffic controller can clear it to descend from its cruise altitude to land on a runway. Not descend to this intermediate altitude, but you're cleared to descend from cruise altitude to land at San Francisco International. And we're working that. Also trying to work what we call sense and avoid systems for unmanned aerial systems that will enable a drone, if you want to call it that, to see other things that are in its vicinity and avoid them, to maneuver, to avoid it as if it had a pilot in it. So that's the kind of stuff our Aeronautics Mission Directorate does. The Science Mission Directorate is our second biggest, next to human exploration. And science is divided into 4 things. Earth science, the study of our own planet. Planetary science, the study of planets everywhere. And I always ask kids, why do we have a separate one for Earth science? What's your name? Huh? Okay, Eduardo? Why do we have a separate one for Earth science? Why doesn't it just fit into planetary science? Are we special? Yes, we are. That's a trick question. We are very special. And Earth has all kinds of stuff that we need to understand. Climate change, you name it. Water, how do we irrigate farms and stuff? And Earth science, we build instruments and everything that assist our partners all over the world. You're going to have an expo here next year, beginning in May. And it's going to go for 6 months, and it's going to be about feeding people. We're about to have 9 billion people on this planet. And if we don't figure it out, if we don't figure out how to get them food and water, we're in deep trouble. And so NASA, Earth Science, along with other agencies around the world, are working on ways to provide imagery to scientists and farmers and everybody so that we can create more safe food and more drinking water. I'll give you a great example. Any farmers in here? Anybody ever grow up on a farm? I didn't either. Anybody ever seen a farm? Okay, how about what do you call a vineyard? Anybody been out to the vineyards? You been to wine country? You ever notice how straight all the rows are? That's not by accident. And they didn't take a T-square. You know, anybody know what a T-square is? Do they even use T-squares anymore? I didn't think so. Okay, showing my age again. We use GPS, Global Positioning System, navigation from space, feed it into a tractor. The tractor, the farmer says, I want furrows this wide, and I want them separated by that much, and I want it to go straight. I want it to go north-south, east-west, or northeast-southwest, and the tractor takes off, and it cuts perfectly straight furrows and all that stuff, and then drops the seed in and everything else. That's coming from space. And so that's what you're going to talk about in the Expo next spring and summer. And that's going to be really, really, really important, and you're going to be hosting it here in Italy. So those are just examples. The one on the left, Solar Dynamics Observatory, it's the area of heliophysics, our sun. That's important because the sun, it burps every once in a while. And when it burps, that one's coronal mass ejections. And they're really powerful. If they come at us in the right way, they could shut down all communications if they did it. We've been very fortunate, and we've not had any big ones come toward Earth. But we need to understand it, and we need to be able to forecast when they're coming if we see it actually happening on the sun. Dawn, I already talked about looking at asteroids. Juno is a very special spacecraft on its way to Jupiter. It's unique in that it uses solar rays. It doesn't use a nuclear power source the way that almost all outer planet missions did up until now. Juno has state-of-the-art or advanced state-of-the-art sensors, solar cells. And so it is able to go all the way to Jupiter just on solar cells. It's never been done before, and Juno is on its way and will arrive there next year. The James Webb Space Telescope is another area called astrophysics. Astrophysics asks two basic questions. How did this stuff start? How did the universe form? And the most important question it asks, that all of us want to know, at least most of us, are we alone? Is there life elsewhere in the universe? The James Webb Space Telescope will it will supplement Hubble, but it will dwarf Hubble in its capability. For those of you who are Hubble Space Telescope fans, it will be about 100 times as powerful as Hubble.
There's some collaboration with the SETI.
Yes. SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, is an organization that NASA provides funding to. It's not really a NASA organization. It's an independent, not-for-profit organization. And it uses telescopes and things all over the world. It sends signals out every once in a while, and it listens. And it's hoping that one of these days someone will answer from way out there. But we collaborate with SETI by providing some funding to them. Yeah. Yes? Hubble? Today there is not a plan to launch another Hubble Space Telescope that's an optical telescope. The difference that he's talking about is Hubble looks across the spectrum. It looks at infrared all the way out to ultraviolet, but it looks dominantly in the visual range so that it can produce images. Once they're processed, it looks like a picture that we took. James Webb will be an infrared telescope, and so it will look at things totally differently than Hubble did. It's in totally different ranges. To my knowledge, we don't have another optical telescope that's planned for deep space anyway, or for space, okay? And then finally, Suomi NPP is a weather satellite, and then Pluto New Horizons is on its way to Pluto. We'll get there next year. Just a very quick picture. If you look at that picture, the four quadrants represent the four areas of NASA science: heliophysics, earth science, planetary science, and astrophysics. And that's 90-some-odd missions, satellites that are orbiting Earth right now or on some planet somewhere, like Curiosity and Opportunity on Mars. And 64 of those 90 are international missions. It means we're collaborating with some other space agency. I think most of you are familiar with Curiosity. Up until Curiosity landed on Mars, there was one nation in the world that was on the Martian surface, only one, and that was the United States. When Curiosity landed, we took 5 other nations physically with us. It has a Russian radiation instrument. It has a Spanish weather station. The big thing sticking up is an anemometer. It measures both surface and air temperature. On the top are cameras and lasers and all kinds of stuff. The European Space Agency has several instruments on there. So today, there are 15 nations on the surface of Mars represented by the scientists who are principal investigators in Curiosity, but 5 nations specifically on the surface because they have hardware. Yes? There is no such thing.
During the travel of Curiosity, how could you be so sure that nothing happens?
How could we be so sure that nothing was going to happen to Curiosity?
During the traveling phase.
We couldn't. And that's the tricky part. Going to Mars is hard.
But will you risk human life?
Yes. The reason we send all these precursors, and every robot, somebody asked me earlier today, is the future of space exploration robotic spaceflight? And I said no. The future of space exploration is a strong collaboration between humans and robots. We send all these robotic instruments out, or missions out, so that we can make sure we're looking, when the Mars Science Laboratory, which was what carried Curiosity, its entire transit for 8 months, the Mars Science Laboratory was measuring the radiation environment between Earth and Mars. Now that it's on the surface of Mars, every single day, Curiosity is sending radiation data about life, about the existence of radiation on the surface of Mars. It's absolutely essential that we use robotic precursors before we send humans. You do not want to risk a human if you don't really have to. Today on the International Space Station, we have an Earth science satellite called RapidScat, and it's looking at ocean winds. It's measuring ocean winds. It was built in the United States. It was removed from the SpaceX Dragon and put into place on the outside of the International Space Station by an arm built in Canada called Dexter, a robotic person, if you want to call Dexter a person. And it was done completely independent of the crew on board, because it was operated by a tele-robotic operator in Huntsville, Alabama, with a Canadian arm, and that's kind of the stuff we're doing today. We deploy CubeSats and microsats from the Japanese experiment module, GEM, through a device, a launch device that was created in the United States, but now is operated by multiple countries. So again, it's all international collaboration. But when we send humans to Mars in the 2030s, you will never be certain, but we'll be about as sure as you can be that the voyage is going to be safe. We're going to know what the long-term impact is going to be on the humans who go. You know, right now our concern is for radiation, and it's not death, because we don't think the radiation is sufficient to kill a crew on the way or on the way back or even living on the surface of Mars. We're looking at what is the long-term impact on quality of life. You know, if the average life of an astronaut after a space flight is 23 years, for somebody who lives on Mars for a year or 3 years, will it be 20 or will it be 15? What will be the long-term impact? And also, you know, is galactic cosmic rays, pretty big particles, radiation particles, is it possible that they might damage a neuron or something, you know, a signal from the brain, and cause the person to come back with an IQ that's 2 points lower than when they left? And it may sound trivial, but we really want to know that kind of thing. And that's the research that's going on the International Space Station today, and will be going on with robots on the surface of Mars. So we'll be pretty sure, okay? I'm getting close to sitting down, but I want to, who knows where this is? Help me. Just in general terms, what part of the world? It's Eastern Africa, Western Saudi Arabia. It's called the Middle East. Huh? Yeah, you're right. Egypt that's Eastern Egypt, with the Nile River zigging-zagging through the Sinai Peninsula. Since we're here in Rome, and Rome has a very, very important role in Christianity. I thought you were saying no, not right. But there's a lot. If you look in, whether it's the Bible, the Torah, or the Quran, that little triangle in there, that's the Sinai Peninsula. And, you know, supposedly the Christians went from, well, they weren't really Christians at the time. The Jews went from Eastern Egypt across the Sinai Peninsula into what is now Israel and all that area. So if you look at the thin blue line between the black part and Earth, that's our atmosphere. If you want to know why we're concerned about the environment, close one eye, take your thumb or any finger and put it up like this, and what happens to the atmosphere? Come on, you got to do it. This is, come on. What happens? What happens to the atmosphere? Huh? That's a question. Somebody help me. Disappears. That means there's not a lot of it. And if we don't take care of it, it will go away. And if it goes away, guess what? Earth will be here for millions and millions and millions of years with no inhabitants. That's what keeps us alive. And the atmosphere, we think is, I don't know, about 75 kilometers, you know, tall, if you want to say that. But the only usable part of it is the first 10 clicks or so, 10 kilometers or so. You get above that, there's not enough oxygen to sustain life. So we really need to take care of that. And you see it vividly from space, this nice thin blue line, but you fly over some parts of Earth, and the nice thin blue line turns into a really cruddy brown line. And then you look down on Earth and you see all the smoke spewing out, and you understand where it came from. That is an incredibly beautiful part of the world from space. And then you reflect on what's going on down there, and you say, okay, what's wrong? I know it's not like it looks. It looks like the most beautiful place I've ever seen, and yet everything I read, everything I hear, everything I know says that is a very violent place. What are we doing wrong as human beings? So the work on the International Space Station, if you look at what's going on Earth today, the difficulties that nations have, and yet astronauts on the International Space Station have been working for 14 years together. They do it collaboratively. They have a single focus, which is trying to make the world better, trying to understand how life can go on in this solar system, and you wonder, why can't we do it in parts of the world like this? So really important. That's my favorite slide of all that I ever took. These are some of the technological things that we're working on. If we're going to go to deep space, we've got to have on-orbit fuel depots. We've got to improve the thermal protection system on spacecraft. That's the one that we're using on Orion. Expandable habitats. The space station will only last so long. We're really trying to help our international partners collaborate with us to extend its life to 2024. Physically, we know it can go to 2028, but that's a finite lifetime. After that, what? And so we're really pushing for individual industries and nations to build modules, other things, other places where people can live and work. And it can be done. And expandable habitat is an example. We're going to fly one of those up to the International Space Station this coming year and heavily instrument it and see how it works. And then solar electric propulsion. This is our international effort, whether it's in Africa, Asia, India, it makes no difference. NASA is all over the world trying to help make the world a better place, and that's our individual effort. And I'm going to close with this, and then we can go to questions for everybody. When I talked about my frustration at not being able to make the world the way that it looks from space, I learned about this story, and some of you may have seen this before. Nkosi Johnson was a young kid born in a place called KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa. And as you might guess, he was born with AIDS. His mother knew that since she had AIDS, she had been infected by her husband who had left the family, and she knew that Nkosi was probably going to be born with AIDS also, and that she may not live very long. So she found a young white woman by the name of Gail Johnson and said, would you take care of my son Nkosi? And should I pass away? And Gail said, sure, I'll do that. And sure enough, Nkosi was born. Several months later, she died, and Gail took Nkosi in and raised him. And everybody who ever knew Nkosi said, this is not a normal child. Nkosi, from the moment he could speak, was telling people, you need to do this, we need to do that, we need to do this for the village, or we need to do this for our country. We need to get rid of this dreaded disease. Never, ever, ever said anything about himself. Never cried out in pain or anything. An American writer by the name of Jim Wooten heard about him, traveled to South Africa, talked to him, and he asked Nkosi, he said, I don't get it. He said, you know, you're going to die and you're sick and you never say anything about yourself. What's the story? And Nkosi said, I may be poor, I may be black, I may have AIDS, but in this world today, we're all the same. And so Jim Wooten wrote a little bitty book called The Biography of Nkosi Johnson, and its title is We're All the Same. That's where it comes from. And Jim Wooten came back to the United States, and Nkosi went on. Several months later, he got a call, said, hey, if you want to see Nkosi, you need to hustle. He is on his deathbed. He is not going to live very much longer. So he rushed back to South Africa. He went to the hospital, sat by Nkosi's side. Nkosi was 12 years old, weighed less than 20 pounds, skin and bones, sores, pus, everything. This little face, black face, racked with sores and everything. Jim said, beautiful white teeth, smiling. Said he had this big smile on his face, as he always did, and he's barking out stuff to people. We need to do this. We need to do that. And Jim Wooten said, stop. Just stop, Nkosi. He said, you're going to die. And he said, Nkosi looked up at him and he smiled and he said, yep. He said, but you could die today. He said, Nkosi looked up at him and he said, yep. He said, and I don't get it at all. You're sick. You're in pain. You have never cried out for anything. You have never said you were in pain. Your mother says you won't take your medication. She has to force you to take it. What's with you? And he said, Nkosi looked at him and he smiled and he told him this. He said, you do all you can with what you have in the time that you have in the place that you are. Do all that you can in the time that you have with what you have in the place that you are. So for this audience, you all are incredibly privileged, incredibly, particularly the students. I mean, you know, you did Space Apps Challenge and stuff like that. How many, if there was no Space Apps Challenge when I was growing up, you're actually participating in space exploration before you even get out of school. You're incredibly privileged, but you can make this world better, and you're obligated to do so. So I would tell you, if you don't remember anything I said, just remember Nkosi's quote and try to live by it. Do all you can with what you have in the time that you have in the place that you are. Thank you all very much, and I'll go take my seat.
Thank you, Charlie, for this beautiful, inspiring talk. We take the time for a few questions. If somebody in the public, the younger generation, or even the older one, please.
I read something about the re-entry of the space shuttle, and I will ask you to tell me if you found any differences between what was the training and actually the real re-entry with all the management dissipation of energy during the...
Yeah, interestingly and not surprisingly, our ability to simulate things today is exquisite. In training for a mission, for ascent, for on-orbit, for entry, I think the only thing that surprised any of us was the amount of vibration on the vehicle. We weren't able to simulate that. There is not a lot of G forces. It's about a G and a half at liftoff, just because of the weight of the vehicle and the thrust that it has. The re-entry was almost exactly the way we had trained, which speaks volumes to the ability to simulate. And we use a simulator in a building, in a training building. We use a modified Grumman Gulfstream II aircraft, and we used a T-38. So we had 3 different ways to go through the simulation of re-entry and landing of the shuttle. So my first re-entry, I thought I was back in the simulator, and I didn't get to land it until my 3rd flight because I was a co-pilot on my first 2. But I did have an opportunity to fly up before the final part, and it felt exactly like the simulator. So our simulators are incredible today in being able to mimic the aircraft and spacecraft for which they're intended.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Another question? Please.
Are you studying in NASA non-chemical rocket like maglev for the future?
Another rocket that's different from the Space Launch System? Is that what you mean?
Yes.
That is the system, the launch system of the future for us right now, anyway, for the foreseeable future, is the Space Launch System. And it's a heavy lift launch vehicle intended to carry Orion into deep space. As I said before, the critical decision for us, and President Obama made it easy, and it wasn't his decision. I have to clarify that. I want to give him credit for it, but the decision was made back in 2004. We had an accident. We lost the shuttle Columbia in 2003, and there was as is always the case, we had a congressionally mandated investigation called the Columbia Accident Investigation Board, and among the recommendations out of the Columbia Accident Investigation Board was phase out of the shuttle over the next 10 years, replace it with commercial capability. NASA should go on and explore and leave low Earth orbit to commercial entities, and separate the crew from cargo. And the administrator at the time accepted that. And so we started off more than 10 years ago trying to get to where we were. When President Obama became president, and I came in, he said, okay, we're going to make it happen. And we're mandated to phase the shuttle out safely. So We want to make sure that we don't have anything go wrong. And I tell everybody, I can't think, when I talk about the quality of the people who work at NASA, you know, our NASA personnel and our contractors, we had people who were going to lose their jobs. They were going to be out of work when Atlantis landed the last time in July of 2011. And yet, when Atlantis landed, it was, the term we use is clean. It was the cleanest vehicle we had flown in 135 missions in terms of impacts from the external tank or anything, in terms of malfunctions during the flight. It was a near flawless mission in every respect. And it was just the pride of the team, contractors and NASA personnel alike, who just felt that this was their obligation and their gift to humanity. And it has just been incredible working with them. We're now off, we've been through a down period where we've had to rely on the Russians for getting our crews to the International Space Station. As a result of the 2 contracts that we selected last month, we hope that by 2017 we'll have 2 American capabilities to get to orbit. Soyuz will still be around, but our intent is to use the 2 American vehicles as our primary way to get us and our international partner astronauts to space. So I think we've recovered pretty well from it. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay.
Maybe a last question, please.
In the aeronautic field, do you think supersonic and hypersonic transport will be the future of civil and military transport?
Now, I did not plant this question. I'm a pilot, and I'm a military pilot, and I love things that go like this and things that go like that. And NASA's work, and I actually have my special assistant in the back is Eric Axtell. Eric, raise your hand. Eric's with me for 6 months, sort of doing what we call a detail, just having an opportunity to come to oxygen-deprived Washington, D.C., to watch what goes on there. The DCM is smiling because she's lived there and worked there before. But as I mentioned, NASA Aeronautics is responsible for everything from vertically lifting vehicles all the way out to hypersonics. And we are working diligently to do several things for the FAA, for the regulating organization in the United States. We've done a series of tests called low boom, where we've come up with ways to design an aircraft such that the sonic boom doesn't go down to the ground where it rattles roofs and breaks windows and stuff. It's deflected into the atmosphere. So you still get like a rumble, but you don't get the crash, window breaking stuff anymore. We have 2 American companies that are very interested in having the FAA change the regulations, because right now in the United States it's illegal to fly supersonically over ground.
Also in Italy.
I know. And in fact, Airbus and I want to say it's Airbus and Ariane are working on a supersonic aircraft again. And I'm hoping that they're hoping that we will provide the necessary data to the FAA and then to ICAO, the international governing organization, so that the rules against supersonic flight over ground can be changed. Again, it will revolutionize the way that we do aviation. And then we go all the way out. And hypersonics is speeds in excess of the speed of sound all the way out to about Mach 5 or so, 5 times the speed of sound. So if you figure the speed of sound roughly 700 or so miles an hour at sea level, 3,500 miles an hour, 4,000 miles an hour, building aircraft and spacecraft that can go at that speed and survive, that's the kind of work that NASA Aeronautics does. But we think that hopefully within the next 5 to 10 years, we will have provided enough data to the FAA that they'll change the regulation, modify the regulation, so you'll actually be able to fly supersonic flight over ground again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much for this question. I think we should move on with this program today, because there is also another event following this one. So I will now continue asking our guest, Kathleen Doherty, from the US Embassy to introduce us the Expo goal for the Milan Expo 2015.
I just realized something. On Thursday, I spoke at the Maker Faire. I spoke before the Italian astronaut, and now I'm speaking as an American astronaut. I realized I will never be on panel with astronauts again, because you guys are so enthusiastic and so contagious in your enthusiasm. I have to think that I definitely was in the wrong business, but really inspirational to hear you speak about the future. I actually think you also were unfair to yourself of what NASA is doing to help problems on the ground right here. And I think what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about NASA and what the work we're doing to improve how we live, how we eat, and what we're doing to survive our own destiny here. So I think, with your permission, I'm going to talk a little bit more about what NASA is doing, which will lead into Milan Expo and to what my next colleague will speak about. There's a couple of things that I think we've already talked about. The NASA apps. We have the winning team here. 2 years ago, I guess, came in second place, and they helped develop a greenhouse program for our space applications, which is really great. But there's also a couple of things. I'm just going to kind of run through them quickly, because what I hope by talking about these things, I will spark some ideas in the audience right now of what we can do by using our applications that we're developing for space to address our problems here today. One is the NASA's Earth Resources Laboratory Application Software, which was adapted and used in a program to provide data for prescription farming. What that does, it captures soil content and rainfall levels that informs farmers' decisions about soil nutrient additives, irrigation, and pest control. They're also looking at carbon pollution levels, obviously. And what does carbon pollution do to our food? Well, raising carbon dioxide levels translate into lower levels of zinc and iron and wheat and other cereals, grains. That means that people not only struggle to have enough food to eat, many of them also suffer from a so-called hidden hunger. They're eating, but they're still deficient in certain micronutrients. The United States is a founding member of the Global Alliance for Climate Smart Agriculture. As part of its commitment to promoting climate change smart agriculture around the world, the U.S. government supports initiatives such as 7 climate hubs around the United States to deliver information to farmers, ranchers, and forest landowners to help them adapt to climate change and weather changes. Water is also an issue that we've worked closely with our European friends. Life support systems for future deep space missions will need to have nearly 100% recycling capability. The Europeans have put together this Melissa project, which is one example which aims at gaining knowledge and know-how in the development of how to make fully recyclable water. In collaboration with industry, it has developed technology that purifies millions of cubic meters of water every day in hundreds of towns. Sensors are now being developed to monitor the Melissa recycling processes that are now used in the processes by food producers. NASA is also studying this hydroponic gardens, this program called Help Plants Grow Faster and Healthier. A soil-less plant growth experiment that enables plants to grow healthy without the use of pesticides has enabled the development of a commercial aeroponic system. This sterile environment allows plants to grow disease-free with 98% less water and no pesticides. NASA is also looking at ways to create air purifiers that eliminate pathogens. Today, this device is helping produce produce and agricultural goods, helping farmers protect their harvest at an operating cost as little as $1 a day. This kind of purifier helps slow down the decay of fruits and vegetables. And then lastly, as I noted, the NASA Apps Challenge. For the next challenge will happen in April of 2015, so I challenge our past winners to participate again to see if you can come in first place this time, and all those who haven't participated in the past to challenge yourselves, and maybe we can have yet another Italian winning team. So I want to thank you, but I hope you just realize that what we do in space has an immediate impact here on the ground. And so I want to thank you, Charles, for actually helping spark our curiosity.
Marcelo Onofri, which is also introducing the project AgroSpazio in Expo 2015, which is connected with the remarks of Kathleen Doherty, and then we have some questions for the public.
Well, let me first say that it's always a great pleasure for Sapienza University of Rome to have the opportunity to welcome Charles Bolden and we have still a wonderful memory of the speech he gave to our students at university not many months ago. So. And I want also to thank our friends from U.S. Embassy to have organized this meeting, to Mr. Venditti, to host us in this wonderful and historical place. I want to say that the collaboration between NASA and Sapienza universities dates back since more than 50 years ago, when the topics involved essentially launchers and propulsion. And that was the time to answer some question just raised a few immediately during your speech, in which there was only one very good method to be sure that nothing could happen wrong, and that was to cross finger, and that's it. And apparently our masters cross fingers very well, because San Marco project was the starting activity of many Italian space work. So, but before passing to what we can do in terms of the topic just introduced by Kathleen, I want also to remind, make mention of the extraordinary Cassini mission to the Saturnian system, where our university contributed to the radio science and radar. And we are now celebrating 10 years of Cassini at Saturn, but the activity is still very alive and successful. In the past 12 months, were especially exciting for our scientists, who discovered an extended underground lake of liquid water under the south pole of Enceladus, and they measured also the depth of the liquid methane seas of Titan. So these research groups are also strongly involved in the search for water on Mars with the mission Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, and in the determination of the interior structure of Jupiter in the mission Juno, which due to arrive at the planet in 2016. But what we would like to mention today is also another field of activity involving university, but also involving our industry, and this is the activity related to the Earth observation and practical application of this. And in particular, I want to mention three main activity related to the data exploitation from Earth observation. First of all, the exploitation of data sets for Earth application focused on natural hazards and meteorology predictions. Another field is, and we hope to have a very strong cooperation with the American side, is the sensors to be used in NASA ESA missions or for the International Space Station. This advanced sensor can also help farmers in monitoring their action to efficiently contrast pests and weeds. So it will be very good. And in this sense, center of the 2015, to the initiative of the Regione Lazio, with actions directly promoted by the President Zingaretti and by the Regional Minister for Industry Fabiani, Rome wants to host a public event to focus the attention to such an important topic as the Expo 2015. In particular, Regione Lazio is planning to carry out in the period May-October 2015 an exhibition of technologies available to astronauts during their space missions, but which can have application. We know indeed that in short time our astronaut Samantha Cristoforetti will be able to have a good espresso coffee at the International Space Station. But we would also show that these technologies could also have a beneficial application on Earth and the quantity of food production. This exhibition will be organized in the center of Rome and will be hosted in a greenhouse, so I think that our group of Space Up can find. And this greenhouse will be technologies developed from space activity, which can effectively work on Earth. The greenhouse comes out from a collaboration with NASA's research from prototypes of lunar and Martian greenhouses, and was discussed in several occasions during the international agrospace workshops organized every 2 years, thanks to the organization of some of our more active industries of the area. This activity dates back from, I think it was 2004, the first workshop that we have. And they have gathered research centers, university, industries, working with working in US and in the Lazio region to carry out very efficient and promising application of this space technology to improve the quality of life on Earth. So I want to give this information, and I hope that this will be a very practical way to collaborate in the future between our two sides. Thank you.
So if anyone has a question related to this second part of today's event, meaning the technologies for living in space, food for space, we have a good opportunity here for having some answer. If not, I think, yes, there is one in the bottom.
Thank you. One question. Is possible to understand if this kind of new exhibition could be joined with the research about climate change? I mean that possibly we need a very urgent green, not green economy, that is a word, a buzzword in my opinion. But the bridge technologies like carbon capture and storage or other technologies which are very, very delayed with respect to the International Energy Agency roadmap. So what I want to say, we have urgent problem on the Earth. Why we don't use the space technologies? For example, in this case, in Regione Lazio, future event, to join strictly the problem on the Earth and the delayed technology with respect to these technologies that are very, very improved with respect to the terrestrial one. Thank you very much.
good question.
Well, climate change is a nightmare, and for sure very focused attention is dedicated to this, and particularly after this awful summer we had this year that was raining every 2 days. So we need to understand better what is going on. But as I mentioned, one of the activities in which we try to have a collaboration between Italy and the United States is also on this field. In particular, in our university, we are improving our meteorology predictions and instruments, software, and so that will be done in a proper way by using the data obtained from satellites. So I think that this is a typical field of cooperation and is included for sure in what we want to show during this exhibition in 6 months from now.
Okay, thank you. Time for another question. If not, we thanks again very much Charlie and Kathleen for this very interesting afternoon we spent together, and we wish them big success.